so this is video 9. What we're going to cover today are 3 of the major events of the American Revolution that you need to be familiar with, especially for the STAAR test. Now, even though there were dozens of battles that took place during the time of the American Revolution, there are only, like I said, these 3 or 4 in particular that you really need to know. The first one we're going to talk about is the Battle of Saratoga. Wrote this one on a note card because I know the spelling's kind of tricky. Saratoga. Now, Saratoga actually took place in New York, in the colony of New York. And the British general who led the attack for Great Britain was known as General Bouillon. You don't have to write that down. No, his name's kind of hard to spell. And then the colonist on the other side who led the charge was Benedict Arnold. Now, you may have heard this guy's name before because what he's the most famous for in history is being a traitor. That's right. Benedict Arnold was actually a spy for the British. Rude, right? I know. Anyway, so obviously during the time of Saratoga he wasn't doing that, but eventually he comes out as a spy and is now, even today, one of the most famous spies in U.S. history. Anyway, so our dude Benedict, kind of sketchy. Eventually, what happens is the British general surrenders at Saratoga. And this battle is known as the turning point of the American Revolution. Here's how you're going to remember that. This is like the sign language for an S for Saratoga, turning point, okay? So you can just make a little like fist pump with your hand. So when you're there taking the STAAR test and they're like, why is Saratoga important? You can just do your little turning point, Saratoga fist pump, okay, turning point. You're like, Miss Gomez, why was Saratoga the turning point of the war? Here's why. Because at this point, the colonists, they win the Battle of Saratoga, okay? And European nations take notice, especially France. And France says, you know, colonists, if you can win this Battle of Saratoga, then I suppose if we help you, that you will perhaps win. And together, I guess we can defeat the British. So after this, France decides to ally with the colonist, which is why it's a turning point, Saratoga, turning point of the war, because France says, hey, yeah, we will ally ourselves with you because now it looks like you might actually have a chance to win. Crazy, right? So anyway, that's what you need to know about Saratoga. It's the turning point of the war, because now France allies with us and thinks we actually have a chance. Moving on to the next battle. This is the Battle of Yorktown. Now, at the time that Yorktown took place, the French had already joined us, and so the French were actually able to set up a blockade of British ships, okay? So this is going to be our symbol for Yorktown. It's a Y, okay? Yorktown is in the colony of Virginia, okay? So make sure you know that. And Yorktown's a blockade, so just kind of push to your fist, like, blockade, you know, blockade. So Yorktown is this blockade. This French fleet had actually set up a blockade. Remember, a blockade is like when there are a line of ships blocking supplies, a blockade of English ships. And the British general who had set up his base at Yorktown was known as General Cornwallis. That's Cornwallis. His name is important to know. He was a British general, obviously, at the Battle of Yorktown, and his name will come up again later on in our course. Anyway, so Cornwallis sets up his base at Yorktown, and the reason he picked Yorktown is to be able to receive supplies into the Chesapeake Bay. If you look at sort of the coastline of Virginia, there's a nice little bay, still there today, obviously, known as the Chesapeake Bay, and so Cornwallis decided to set up his base there because he knew that it would be super friendly in order to receive supplies. So anyway, Cornwallis goes ahead and sets up his base at Yorktown. Well, the French fleet, remember after Saratoga, which is a turning point, they decided to join our cause, and they set up a blockade so that he's not able to receive any supplies. So the French set up that blockade at Yorktown, and because of that, the Americans sort of conquering of them was super easy since they didn't have any supplies. Remember, it's pretty important when you're fighting a war to be able to have the materials you need, and Cornwallis wasn't able to get those thanks to that blockade at Yorktown. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about, I actually mentioned to you right before the Moy test. That's Valley Forge, okay? Valley Forge is in Pennsylvania, okay? So far we've covered 3. The first one is Saratoga. Remember, Saratoga is in New York. Second one is Yorktown. Remember, Yorktown is in Virginia. And the last one is Valley Forge, okay? Valley Forge is in Pennsylvania. And what Washington was doing by going to Valley Forge was actually a retreat because of the hardships of his men. At this point in the war, their toes were falling off because they were so cold, they were starving, because they were having a lot of trouble getting money, getting supplies from the Continental Congress because the colonies were fighting over who would give it and when. The process took a really long time, and as a result, Washington's troops were entirely discouraged. Like I said, their toes are falling off. They don't have any clothes. They're literally dying because of lack of blankets. Simple necessities could have kept these men alive, but they didn't even have that. What's important to remember about Valley Forge is that it wasn't a battle. The reason that it's important is because it's at this point that the soldiers decide to stick there. They stick with General Washington. You guys have to understand that Washington had this intense leadership ability over his life. He was able to tell his men and to command them with this compassion that made them feel like he was on their side. He would, read to them from Thomas Paine. He would be there suffering with them. When all the other generals went home, he was there at Valley Forge, bandaging up their bloody toes and holding them as they died. They loved him and they were willing to die for him. So at Valley Forge, in one of the harshest winters that Pennsylvania had seen, the men are there, starving and freezing to death. A group of women does come to kind of help the soldiers, and again, the reason that most of them didn't just desert and retreat was because of this love of their country and this dedication to George Washington. Now, as George Washington is there and there's these dying soldiers around him, one of the quotes he reads from Thomas Paine, remember he wrote Common Sense, is this one. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country, but he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. So the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot are going to shrink right now from service to their country. What that means is there are going to be those fair weather people who are like, you know what, I'm a sunshine soldier, meaning that when things are good, I'll be around, but when things are bad, forget it. But what Thomas Paine is saying is, hey, these are the times that try men's souls. This isn't a time for the sunshine soldier. If you're going to be one of those guys, you might as well already leave. But these are the times for the people who are going to be devoted, really, to service to their country. So Washington, he reads them these quotes from Thomas Paine to inspire them to fight. And it's at Valley Forge, when things are not okay at Valley Forge, that Washington's men are inspired to stay there because of the loyalty to him and their loyalty to the country, or this idea of a country that would eventually be the United States of America. After Valley Forge, things began to turn around. We had these French allies that we had at Saratoga, which was the turning point of the war in New York. We had the successful French blockade at Yorktown. And so now, we have the French on our side, and we're about to come to the very last battle of the war, where we finally gain our independence and begin the greatest experiment in the history of the world, the beginning of the Republic of the United States of America.